I knew I was getting fired the second Niles Harwood walked in like he'd practiced the whole thing in front of a mirror. 9 on the dot, he opened that little leather case and read off a tablet. Terminated, effective immediately. Didn't even lift his eyes. His voice wobbled just enough to let you know he wanted it to sound serious. I stood, set my badge on the table. Win Dalrymple, HR kid, barely 30, glanced at it, then at Niles, then swallowed hard. We need Inez's clearance, he mumbled, sliding it back like it might burn him. I didn't bother arguing. 30 years in, and I've learned how to swallow a pile of garbage without gagging. Security, Rafe Booker, stood near the door. Solid guy, hands folded, eyes quiet, didn't move a muscle. He'd seen worse than this little puppet show. Niles had on this too-tight jacket, shiny cufflinks like he thought those could buy him authority. Smile looked laminated. He wasn't firing me. He was performing, reading from a script written by someone who forgot I helped build the entire company from the inside out. He read the last line like it was supposed to land hard. I set my pen down next to the badge, fixed my tie, and said one thing. Tell Garrick the board meeting in 6 hours should be interesting. That was it. No drama, no raised voice. My hands stayed in my pockets. I was done swinging before sunrise. Quick note, before listening, share which city or country you're watching from. And let's continue. Out in the lobby, Nora Keene didn't say a word. She just slid an envelope toward me and nodded at Wynne over my shoulder. Her eyes cut sharp, like she already knew this circus wasn't going to hold. The framed Lyle family photo behind reception caught the light. No me in there, of course. Never wanted a plaque. I wanted the wiring behind the wall, the code. What none of them knew. 3 hours earlier, I'd already filed an emergency recall under Clause 17C. The real trapdoor. Automatic freeze on appointments and control snapping back to whoever holds the majority. That'd be me, with 69%. Inez Mallory had the courier receipts logged, each packet signed, stamped, backed by clean lines and quiet power. Mara Quimby, legal, had hers too. She doesn't bluff, doesn't blink. She'll fold a man in half, with a sentence that fits on a sticky note. Rafe didn't ask for my ID when I passed the turnstile, just looked at the envelope in my hand and said, "See you later?" "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. At exactly 7:12 that morning, I signed and activated Clause 17C. Inez stood across the desk, steady as ever, holding the courier manifests. No small talk, no second guessing. 3 addresses, 3 packets. First pickup hit at 7:29, second at 7:41, third at 7:56. I know because I held the carbon copies before they left the building. She showed me the acceptance scans, those tight little green boxes, her initials inked next to each one. She runs her logs like a safe, every page straight, every margin clean, no streaks, no crossouts. Inez doesn't scribble, she documents. The packet itself was thick. Trigger letter, equity register, scanned consents from the past decade, notarized affidavits, 2 of them, plus a clean reprint of Clause 17C, including the amendment nobody talks about anymore. That amendment came from a close call with a Boston fund that almost pulled support back in 2018. They pushed hard. We rewrote the clause to be final once filed. No clawback, no rehearings, one-way switch. By 9:26, Mara had flagged 17C to Eldon Parr, our board chair. I read the internal memo later. He didn't push it to legal review. He didn't ask for clarification, just underlined one sentence and wrote 2 words in the margin. Operative and binding. That's Eldon. Doesn't raise his voice, just signs things that sink battleships. At 9:14, my phone buzzed while I was standing on the sidewalk outside the building. Rowan Shea, lead investor, most influential seat at the table, sent me a message that just said, "If 17C is live, I'm in for continuity. But remove family appointments within 24 hours. That's his way. No filler, just terms." About 20 minutes later, one of the board assistants forwarded me 2 red receipts by mistake. Those slips usually get buried in admin folders, but people forget who actually owns what. First one said, "Packet received, logged 10:03. Second one read, "This is substantial." Substantial means you got us, just in a polite way. They never saw it coming. Inez ran the register at 10:18 and printed out a snapshot of the cap table. My block was sitting heavy at the top. The rest of the holders drifted down in tiny little slices, like a fence line made of thumbtacks. Nothing flashy, no math games, just steady accumulation, piece by piece over decades. I never posted about it, never bragged. I just bought quietly when the window was open. The old CFO, back during his divorce, needed to cash out fast. I wrote the check. A vendor once offered 1.5 in place of payment. I took it. It wasn't loyalty. It was math. 17C wasn't there to help me pull a stunt. It existed because sometimes someone without skin in the game swings too hard. This clause stops the bleeding before it hits a nerve. It says, plain as day, if someone without equity tries to fire a corporate officer without board approval, all authority freezes, and the company shifts to majority control until the board reviews the action. Niles didn't just trip that wire. He danced right across it like a guy trying to set off alarms. I didn't need to guess how it would land. I knew. Mara's summary of the 11:02 council call laid it out clear. She read the clause verbatim to Garrick's personal attorney. The man said, "Oh no," twice. And attorneys don't repeat themselves unless they see the whole floor cracking underneath. Somewhere close to noon, Rowan sent me a screenshot. It was a message Niles had texted him at 8:47 that morning. "We're clearing dead weight." Rowan added just 2 words. "Fix this." It's wild how fast vision turns into damage control. I wasn't at the country club when it hit. I pieced it together later from board minutes and Mara's call notes, clean and cold the way paper tells the truth. Garrick Lyle was on hole 8, chewing a cigar, enjoying the kind of morning that lets a man believe he's untouchable. His counsel finally reached him at 12:04. The opening line wasn't polite. It was simple. "We need you back at headquarters." Garrick said he'd finish 9. Counsel didn't raise his voice, he just said no. That's when you know things have tilted. Per the transcript attached to the emergency packet at 12:06, counsel read Clause 17C straight off the page. No interpretation, no smoothing the edges. Immediate suspension of executive authority upon unilateral termination by non-equity appointee. Automatic deferral to majority shareholder pending review. The line went dead quiet on the other end. Then came a curse I won't repeat because it doesn't add anything, except proof a man finally heard what he didn't want to hear. Garrick drove back in his cleats. Rafe later slipped me the security footage times in a quiet note. Badge hit the garage gate at 12:27. No waving to staff, no detours. When a man who loves entrances walks straight, it tells you the room already beat him there. He went right into legal. Mara had the leather folder open, tabs out, paper squared. Stuart Klein sat 8 inches back from the table like the space might soften the blow. Eldon stayed on speaker, voice steady and flat, the way it gets when he's already done the math. "Who signed the termination?" Garrick asked. "According to protocol L-2 at 12:31, nobody answered for 9 seconds. That's an eternity when you're waiting for air." Then Mara said it, calm and exact. "Niles Harwood, appointed executive, no equity." "He doesn't have sign-off," Garrick said, pushing the words like they might push back. "He doesn't," Mara answered. "That's the problem." She slid the courier slips across the table. Timestamps lined up. My trigger letter dated earlier that morning, locked and filed before Niles ever opened his mouth. Paper beats posture every time. "We'll rescind," Garrick said. He sounded tired now. Mara shook her head once. "Irreversible. The clause was amended in 2018. You initialed it." She pointed to a small circle with his letters inside. "Old ink. New trouble." From the same notes, I saw Stuart lean in and whisper, "What's our exposure?" Mara didn't dance. She laid it out clean. Ignore it, and they risk fiduciary breach. Pretend it didn't happen and invite regulators to the table. Either way, reputational damage unless they follow the clause. The clean path was to convene at 3, honor the paper, and stop handing out titles like party favors. Garrick asked where Niles was. Nora told me later he'd been measuring drapes in my old office and ordering a new desk pad. That detail stuck with me. He hadn't earned a pencil, and he was already picking leather. They told Garrick the board clock had started. He asked how long he had. Eldon answered from the speaker, voice level, 2 hours and 29 minutes. That wasn't a threat. That was a calendar invite. That calendar invite was ticking, whether anyone liked it or not. After the dust settled, Inez showed me her access journal so I could see how close they came to pulling the wrong wire. At 9:22, Niles had emailed her with a single line. "Deactivate Calder immediately." No greeting, no authority cited, just a command he didn't have the weight to give. Inez opened the registry instead of the IT panel. That's the difference between someone who understands power and someone who thinks passwords run a company. My token sat over 3 things that morning: the shareholder ledger, the governance signer key, and the proxy voting gate. Pull that, and filings freeze. Investor pipeline stall. Voting authority locks midstream. She told me she stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds, then closed the window and carried her laptop straight to legal. If I pull him, we lose filings and investor pipelines, she told Mara, no drama in her voice, just bolts lined up in a tray. Mara didn't blink. Don't touch it. That was logged at 9:31 under internal action. J-14. Clean. Time stamped. Done. Niles didn't stop. Around noon, Wynn forwarded me a message with a note that read like an apology he wasn't sure he deserved. The Slack directive from Niles said, "We need control of cap table ASAP." Wynn added, "I didn't know what to do. I froze." I could picture him at his desk, staring at a blinking cursor like it was a test he hadn't studied for. He's honest, that kid. Honesty survives if the building doesn't eat it alive. At 12:19, Rowan's second text came through. 24-hour condition, remove familial appointments, or we pull support. No emojis, no soft edges. His funds saved us once when cash flow got thin and banks got nervous. He never forgets leverage, and neither do I. Then at 12:33, Inez flagged a side thread buried in the email chains. Subject line read, "Let's align." Inside, Niles promised Jasper Lyle a slice of options if he backed the termination for optics. The word optics made my jaw tighten. That's what people say when they mean theater over substance. Mara wrote in the margin, "Unauthorized inducement, worth keeping." That was lawyer for loaded gun. Jasper always liked to float near heat without standing in it. I knew he'd fold once the room got bright. Men who fear heat don't hold wires long. Inez also logged that my name remained the primary digital signatory on every binding instrument. Not IT access, registry authority. People mix those up all the time. Companies don't run on help desk tickets. They run on chains of authority that either hold or snap. Around 12:45, Nora told me the building had gone low volume. Lobby music off. Conversations clipped short. The kind of hush that feels like weather changing. At 12:52, Rafe texted me. "Standing by. No changes to your physical access. Not until I see formal removal from Inez." He understands rails. He doesn't jump tracks because someone shouts. By 1:05, the smiles were gone. 3 hours can stretch wide when every minute tilts the floor under your feet. I waited in the hallway at 2:56, read the wall calendar like it might give me some kind of omen. It didn't. Just a corporate photo next to a list of dates nobody would remember. At exactly 3, the door opened, and I walked in. No rush, no drag. Just right on time. You don't have to throw your weight around when the documents already outweigh the room. Niles had tried to sit at the head. Eldon pointed to the side row. "Observer," he said, firm but not cruel. That word lands like a slap when you've been walking around thinking you're in charge. Niles moved. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor like it owed him something and didn't pay up. Mara opened the meeting without ceremony. She read the trigger under 17C. Voice flat, finger on the page like she was tracking heartbeats. Emergency recall, interim authority suspended. Voting rights defer to the majority shareholder pending review. No tone, no sugar, just law on paper. I asked for a binding vote to rescind all appointments made in the past 48 hours. My words were simple. No show, no edge, just what was required. Eldon nodded once and said, "No commentary." His eyes met mine for a half second, same way a neighbor nods at you after watching you fix your roof in a thunderstorm. Quiet respect, no applause. Garrick didn't say a word. His hands were folded like he might snap the table in half if he moved them. His jaw stayed tight. He gave Jasper one glance. Jasper didn't return it, just stared at the wood grain like it might sketch out an escape route. Mara slid a printout across to Eldon. Thin, white, quiet. The "let's align" email. Eldon read the part where Niles promised Jasper a slice of options in return for support. The sound that followed wasn't loud. It was a chair shifting. Someone clearing their throat just to break the weight in the air. That's the sound men make when they know they can't defend the next sentence. Rowan dialed in. His voice filled the speaker. No emotion, just terms. "I'll stay supportive if you clear family appointments, honor the clause, and start a governance audit by week's end." Then he added, 24 hours. The kind of deadline that doesn't need repeating. Somewhere, I swear I could feel the wall clock slow down. Inez stepped forward and placed 2 gold cards on the table edge. Attendance and registry confirmation. She marked me as majority holder at 69%. She marked Niles as observer, non-voting. That label hits heavier than it reads. Wynn sat against the wall like he wanted the paneling to swallow him. He caught my eye and gave the smallest nod, the kind you give someone after a truck misses you by a foot. He wasn't playing brave. He just needed to know no one was going to make him. Eldon called the motion live. "We'll deliberate in executive session," he said. "You'll have an answer before close." I didn't sit. I don't sit unless the table's mine or the matter's settled. It's a rule I made years ago, and it's kept me honest. I stayed standing in that boardroom until Eldon cleared his throat and asked Garrick and me to step into the adjoining room while the rest went private. The smaller room had no windows, just a low table and a steady hum from the vents that made every sentence feel heavier. Garrick dropped into the chair like it had been waiting for him. I didn't sit. I opened my folder and pulled out 2 sheets. "You've got a choice," I said, laying them flat. Left page is a buyout. 10 times my stake's value. Clean exit. No lawsuit. You keep the company name and the building. No clause hanging in the doorway. I kept my voice steady, the same tone I used when my son was a kid and needed to hear something hard without hearing anger. Calm lands better. Right page is a reorganization, I continued. I stay majority. I take executive chair. We audit the entire suite. No more family appointments. Governance gets teeth. You'll hate the meetings, but you'll like the numbers. I slid the pages close enough for his fingers to reach. Garrick rubbed his temples like he was trying to press the headache out. "I didn't want this," he said. I believed him. He always liked applause more than policy. He liked shaking hands, cutting ribbons, giving speeches about growth. Guardrails bored him. Guardrails only matter when the car starts drifting. "Can't we rescind the morning?" he asked, looking up at me like maybe I'd blink. "No," I said, not sharp, just firm. 17C is one way. You initialed it in 2018 when that Boston fund panicked and almost pulled out. You wanted it final. It's final. I tapped the small circle on the copy I brought with me. His initials sat there in faded ink. People remember photos and celebrations. They forget circles on page 9 that decide everything later. "This isn't revenge," I told him. "If I wanted revenge, I would have made noise years ago. I built structure because you kept hiring cousins and handing out titles like party favors." He gave a short laugh without humor. He knew it was true. Men who build companies with charm always bristle when paperwork beats them. His hand hovered over the buyout page like it might burn him. "How long do I have?" "You'll get the formal tonight," I said. "You have 24 hours. That wasn't my clock. That was Rowan's. I don't bluff with deadlines that belong to someone else." "What about Niles?" he asked, eyes still on the paper. "Observer seat for now," I answered. "If the vote goes the way it should, he turns in his badge and title by morning. We'll keep it civil, no scenes." "And Jasper?" His voice dropped on that one. I let out a slow breath. "He tried to play the room. The room didn't play back. He can stay as a manager if he wants a real shift and a real deliverable. No whispered options, no backroom deals." Garrick leaned back and stared at the ceiling for a long second, like maybe the vents would offer a third option. They didn't. I gathered the folder and stepped toward the door. "You built a storefront," I said before opening it. "I built the frame behind it. I'm making sure the beams hold." He didn't try to stop me. Some men argue with a tide. Smart ones step back and pretend they chose the shoreline. At 4:10, I heard a knock so soft it could have been a draft. Inez stepped in and closed the door behind her, folder in hand. "Side matter," she said, eyebrows twitching just enough to count as drama from her. When Inez does subtle, it means check the bolts. She laid the folder on the table and opened it to a page marked with her usual tabs. Expense approvals from Stuart Klein. Vendor payments traced back to a small firm out of Fremont. Company was clean on paper, until you saw the registration tied to his ex-brother-in-law, the kind of detail that hides in plain sight. "Conflict?" I asked. "Looks like it," she said. She tapped the ledger with one fingernail. "He disclosed some, not all. Enough to say he didn't lie, but not enough to say he told the truth. I don't chase headlines, but I don't leave rot in the walls either. Quiet mold turns to collapse if you don't pull the drywall." I called Eldon and Mara on speaker. "Quiet replacement," I said. "No public flag. Bring in internal audit to oversee treasury and controls. Full coverage until we find the next fit." Mara agreed without conditions. Eldon asked only one thing. "Effective when?" "Tomorrow after the vote," I said. That gave the floor time to settle and the paperwork time to line up. Rafe walked me to the elevator that evening. He had his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets like he always did when something important was about to land. "You sure you want the chair?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I want the structure. That's the job." He nodded. He respects answers that don't try to dress up. At Nora's desk, she passed me a small yellow note, folded twice. "Rowan called twice, says the 24-hour window is firm. That's his style. Give rope, then see what you tie. No reminders, just consequences." At 5:33, Wynne sent me an email with the subject line, "I'm sorry." Inside was a pasted Slack thread, Niles instructing him to revoke my system access. Wynne added, "I didn't execute. Inez told me to wait." He didn't want praise. He wanted to know if doing nothing had been the right move. I told him yes. At 5:50, Jasper called. His voice looped in circles, said he never agreed to anything with Niles. I let him spin, then read the exact line back to him from the chain. Silence on the other end. "I won't push it further," I said, "but I won't forget it." He thanked me like a man thanks a seatbelt after the crash didn't happen. At 6:12, Mara texted one line, "Board's leaning your way." She attached a draft resolution rescinding every appointment made in the last 48 hours. No fluff, just process. 1 page, all muscle. I walked past the glass conference rooms and looked out at the city. You can tell when a building exhales. That place didn't feel proud. It felt ready, like it was waiting for someone to read the next line out loud. Before I left, I stepped into my old office. Desk had fresh scuffs. The chair still warm. Niles had stuck his initials on a sticky note to the backrest like a dog marking a tree. I peeled it off, folded it in half, then folded it again, and slid it into my pocket. Not because it mattered, because I do. The board reconvened at 6 o'clock sharp. Eldon's tie sat loose at his collar, the knot finally giving up. Mara's stack of papers had been cut nearly in half. That's how you know decisions have landed and nobody's still shopping for courage. Rowan stayed on speaker. His voice filled the corners without effort. He never wastes volume. Eldon read the motion slow and clean. Rescind executive appointments made within the last 48 hours. Suspend derivative authorities. Reinstate control per Clause 17C. Defer to the majority shareholder pending full review. He didn't look up while he read. He didn't need to. Votes came in around the table, one after another. No speeches. No hedging. It wasn't close. Niles stared down at the table like the grain had betrayed him personally. The badge on the folder in front of him looked cheap, like a name tag you get at a trade show and throw away in the hotel room. He didn't say a word. Learning you're not the lead doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it just empties a man out. I asked for a second motion. Appointment of an executive chair for the transition. Not permanent, not ceremonial. Accountability while governance got rewired and audit teams moved in. I said it plain because plain travel's better. Eldon nodded. "Interim," he said, with authority bound to audit outcomes. He called the vote. It passed with one abstention. Jasper, of course it was. Garrick finally spoke. His voice sounded like it had been sanded down. He said he needed time to consider the buyout. Eldon didn't argue. He just set the boundary. "You have until tomorrow at 4 p.m. Rowan added, "My condition stands. Announce the audit by noon." No tone shift, no follow-up. Deadlines save companies more often than speeches ever did. I stepped aside and called Stewart to let him know Treasury was transitioning. He answered like a man who'd been waiting for the phone to ring. "I'll cooperate," he said. "Good," I told him. "No press. We keep this in the ledger, not the parking lot." He agreed without bargaining. That told me more than a denial would have. Inez logged the actions immediately. She wrote 2 lines in the register with her steady hand. 17C active. Confirmed. Appointments rescinded. Certified. She stamped the page. I watched the ink soak in. There's something grounding about a clean mark done right, especially after a day full of voices. Wynne moved around the room with a tray of water like a church usher during a long sermon. Careful steps. Eyes down. Niles didn't touch his glass. Garrick drank twice. You notice those things on days that end up in binders and testimony summaries. When it wrapped, Eldon stood and shook my hand. No applause, no toast, just a firm grip and level eyes. "Be dull," he said. "Dull saves us." "I'm good at dull," I told him. I built my life on dull winning late. Outside the room, Nora had a sticky note ready before I even asked. Press called asking if there's a resignation. I told them to watch the filings. She smiled thin, like someone who knows when starving a rumor is the smartest move. I took the note. folded it once, and slid it into my pocket as I headed down the hallway, already dialing the audit team to set the next thing in motion. At 8:41 the next morning, Garrick's email hit every inbox. Just one line. Stepping down for personal reasons. No adjectives, no phrasing to stretch the truth. He kept it short, and that was the smart move. I read it once, nodded, and moved on. At 8:57, Niles came through the lobby in yesterday's suit, collar bent, tie loose. He looked smaller, like the night had taken more from him than just rest. Rafe waited at the turnstile and didn't speak until Niles reached for his badge. "I'll need the badge and the phone," Rafe said, hands still in his jacket. Niles didn't argue, just handed both over like a man returning a hotel key after getting kicked out early. Wynn stood off to the side, 10 feet back, hands in his pockets. He didn't smile. Observer became former in the system before Niles even cleared the glass doors. I don't enjoy seeing young men walk out like that, but I like the damage they might cause even less. Some lessons hurt more than they cost. If he keeps the one he just got, it's still worth something. At 9 sharp, the new team gathered. No balloons, no donuts, no welcome speeches, just a whiteboard and a list. Investor appointees with real experience, not handshakes and family stories. Legal sat next to compliance. Internal audit took the seat next to treasury. Inez moved around the table, placing a binder at each chair. "Register keys, consent templates, voting procedures," she said, short and focused. Rafe took a chair against the back wall, arms folded, eyes on the entrance. Nora sat to my left, typing fast. No sighs, no throat clears. Just keys moving like clockwork. I walked through the first steps. Governance audit, cap table lockdown, rewrite of all sign-off chains, a policy to block family appointments without blind review from Eldon's committee. I didn't make speeches. I kept it crisp. People follow short sentences better than they follow applause. Stewart got reassigned to a senior advisory role. No public memo. Internal audit took treasury for now. Accounts stayed open. Vendors stayed paid. We didn't make noise. "Best kind of fix is the one your customers never feel," Rowan called in at 10:12. "You have my backing," he said. "Don't drift." He asked about Jasper. I told him Jasper could stay if he had a real role with a real deliverable. No whispers, no nudges, just work. He'll have a manager now. Someone who says yes or no without needing a family tree. Wynn raised his hand. "Do you want HR to send out a memo?" "No," I said. "We'll let the filings talk. You just log the changes and keep them tight." He nodded like a man who finally got a map after too many speeches. Before lunch, I pulled the sticky note with Niles's initials from my coat pocket, walked to the shredder, and fed it through. Small things pile up in a man's coat if he doesn't clear them. That afternoon, I sat at the head of the table, not for pride, not for posture, because the view needed someone who understood where the weight sat, who knew which beams held the roof and which ones just looked nice. Eldon called the meeting to order, gave me a nod, and we started. No ceremony, no recap, just work. We treated the audit like a house plan, governance first. What exists, what's missing, who's accountable. Delegation second, what's handed off, what isn't, who signs. Compensation third, how much, to whom, and why. No skipping steps, no clever shortcuts. I told the room, "You'll get tired of checklists. That's good. Checklists didn't get us here, not having them did." Inez went through the registry like she was flipping a switchboard. All signers verified, all proxy gates reset, Clause 17C posted where people can actually see it. She slid a printed copy into a wall sleeve by the main display. Nobody laughed. We weren't in a laughing room anymore. Mara presented the new sign-off chain rework. She spoke plainly. If you don't hold equity, and you weren't voted in, you cannot hire or fire an officer. She underlined cannot with a slow stroke. You could hear the pen scratch across the paper. No one challenged it. We gave Rowan's condition a full line in the minutes. Every family appointment that hadn't come through a blind review got pulled. No exceptions. Jasper stayed, but in a role under a real manager who didn't share his last name. I looked across the table. "I want something real delivered by quarter's end," I told him. "Yes," he said. "We'll see." Rafe spoke from the back wall, calm as always. "No escorts unless legal clears it, no badge gossip. If someone leaves, let them." He treats silence like a tool. He knows when to use it better than most people use words. It steadied the room. Wynn raised his hand. Do we need a template for appeal documentation? He asked. Then, should we standardize thresholds for escalation? Smart questions. He didn't want attention. He wanted a map. Men like that get promoted around me. Sprinting is for kids. After 40, you walk with a binder. I read a plain statement into the record. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for structure. We honor paper and process. We don't hand out titles in exchange for smiles. Eldon nodded once. Mara logged the line into the minutes without changing a word. As I headed out, Nora glanced up from her desk. New badge? She asked. Gold chip, I said. No fanfare. She keyed it in and smirked just slightly. Done. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Back in my office, the one with the view and the scuff in the corner tile, I shut the door and opened the founding documents again. I wrote Clause 17C years ago, not as a trap, as a railing, something you grab when the stairs tilt steep. That day, a lot of people finally grabbed hold. Before you head out, quick question, when loyalty collides with structure, which do you choose and why? Tap hype to boost this, subscribe and like, then comment.